Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Goldschmidt. I'm a journalist here in Argentina and a proud member of Young Hadassah International. Today, I'm going to be conducting an interview to Estelle Rubinstein, who is head of social work at Hadassah Medical Organization. She's both based in Ain Karem and Mount Scopus. So thanks, everyone, for the time and attention, and especially thank you to Estelle for your incredible work. Estelle, I wanted to start off by asking you what type of mental health services are being provided at Hadassah and who's receiving them.
Thank you, and shalom to everyone who is here today. It's so important that you're with us. I must say that. I think I can answer your question in two parts. I will do it shortly. On that terrible Saturday on October the 7th, the first thing that the Department of Social Work does is to manage the telephone hotline information center that answers the desperate phone calls of people looking for family members. Seriously injured patients were transferred from the south of Israel, largely via helicopter, because we got really severely injured to our hospital. Many of them couldn't identify themselves, or initially couldn't identify themselves, and there were also cases that people arrived and they had already died, and we had to help families deal with the identification of their dead family members and to connect them with their injured family members here. And if we're talking about trauma, the trauma of family members is that desperate search for their loved ones. And the quicker and more efficiently that we can do that process and give them answers is important for future mental health. Their trauma is the search. And that was what our wonderful team of social workers did throughout Saturday night into Sunday. The second part starts after patients, the injured, have been identified, family members are here, doctors have spoken with everyone who has to be spoken to, and then we provide broad psychosocial care for all the injured and their family members, together with our psychologists, together with our psychiatrists when necessary, and together with mental health officers from the army for the injured soldiers. So it's an entire system that we have to hold together. And as the director of the department, I'll answer later questions, to hold the social workers in these desperately sad situations.
It sounds like an incredibly sensitive network, and even hearing your voice makes me feel better. So your patients are very lucky to have you. I wanted to ask you, how is the level of trauma impacting patients, and how are these services distinct to what you typically provide on the day-to-day basis of the hospital?
I think the important thing here is that the current situation is impacting not only, of course, on those injured in the hospital, but all the other patients as well. We are all living in a situation. I've been in this country for 40 years. None of us have ever seen a situation like this. I think, there is a public event that is initially the mass casualty event of that Saturday, Sunday, and now it has become a personal, private family event. Each family with their own history and their own limitations and strengths. And this is true not only of the injured themselves, but also of other patients here whose families have been impacted by this catastrophe.
That sounds so difficult. What has the response by the social workers and other mental health professionals been in treating these patients?
I'm happy to answer this question because I come from South Africa. You can hear my accent. I sort of feel as if I'm not quite Israeli, although perhaps I am. the commitment of the staff here, the way that people mobilize immediately. We don't need a telephone system where one calls the next one and calls the next one. People are here, and the more experienced ones teach the younger ones. And that is the most dominant response. The other side of it is that we're professionals and we're also participants. All our young social workers, most of our young social workers have husbands and brothers and friends who've been called up into the army. The older ones, like myself, have children and son-in-laws in the army. So the response is both professional and personal at the same time. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'm going to say 40 years sounds like a long enough time for fully Israeli commitment.
Okay,
Also,
yeah.
it's glad to hear that at least there's this unity going on and that people are showing up. How are the staff dealing with the stress of the situation, and how are they also taking care of themselves?
We're trying to help them. There are two things that can help professionals. And this is from the literature, and this we learned through the years of Israeli, the challenge that Israeli society has dealt with, certainly in Jerusalem. Apart from the support, and I'll say something about that we provide for our staff, not only for social workers, but for staff in other departments, there is also the issue of a competence and a sense of competence. If I know what I have to do and I feel that I'm able to do it well, I will cope better in a situation that challenges me professionally. And we're all doing this. The psychologists are doing it now. We did it this morning, just today, but we're doing it all the time. Training our social workers, helping them, teaching them skills. This is a situation that we're learning about really on the run. And we're working together to teach them on the one hand. And for example, we have in our department what we call 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, people meet in our department and people go around and the workers talk about that interface between our professional lives and our personal lives.
That sounds so important. I would like to attend one of those meetings. Is there one patient story that particularly sticks out that you would like to share with us? How were they injured and what were their mental health needs? What is your team currently doing for them? And how are they doing right now?
You know, I decided earlier that I'm going to bring a different kind of an example, perhaps, because you're going to hear from Michal as someone who was injured. I want to bring a different example. There is a woman of about 64 who was hospitalized in our internal care, in an internal medicine department, a regular, ordinary patient. And her daughter was missing from the party in the south. In fact, two of her daughters. One daughter was relatively mildly injured. She was hospitalized for 2 or 3 days and she was released. Our patient is divorced. She's alone with these 4 older children. They're in their 20s. And one of her children has been missing since Saturday. She was hospitalized on Sunday. She has a chronic lung illness. She needs oxygen. She's a sick woman. And this last Saturday, a week later, our social workers had to come in together with the army, the people from the army, to notify her that the body of her daughter had been identified. And through that, she's not one of the injured. She's not counted in the numbers of those who are in our hospital and being treated because of the war that we're dealing with now. And this was heartrending, and the staff was so kind and so wonderful. And that's an example. It's not just the people who were physically injured, it's the terrible stories, the terrible losses. And they all happen in the context of people's lives and their relationships. This is a sick woman. She's been dealing with her lung disease for years. They arrived at this tragedy tired in many ways. So that's a sort of another kind of an example of the situations that people are dealing with in this country today.
That's terrible, and also so important to keep in mind that the numbers that were shared when we first starting out this meeting, I think I realize pretty clearly now that it's a much broader community and network of people who need Hadassah's help. To finish this interview, what might your advice be to individuals on this webinar, everyone who's hearing this, regarding the best way, in your opinion and experience, to cope with stress?
You know, we've been thinking about this a lot, and I think that we've all been exposed to all sorts of psychological advice about how one deals with trauma, how we deal with stress, breathing. We've learned all that. I think that what is important here is for us to understand that we're dealing with collective trauma. And if it's collective trauma, it is something about identity and relationships. And I think that, for example, what the people on this webinar are doing now, and what, for example, our social workers are doing now, helps them deal with the collective trauma. A number of our workers have said in those 12 o'clock groups that I described that they feel lucky that they can, first of all, that they can work now, and that they can work now around this. They're honest, and they say that it helps them cope with the stress. Now, we've seen this all over Israel, a huge mobilization of people doing whatever they can. And it is so heartwarming that you're doing it there as well. You're here now. That's part of the coping. I really think that that's because it's identity and it's collective. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. It's really important. I told our team today that I'm waiting until what is here, 6, 7 o'clock, to talk to you. And they were just so moved that you're there with us and behind us. So thank you so much. And thank you, Olivia.
No, thank you. I hope next time I'm at Hadassah, I'm going to say hi to you. And
Definitely.
I think I speak for everyone that when I say thank you for everything and the amazing hard work you're doing in such difficult times. Thank you, Estelle, and thanks everyone for your attention.